How you doing there? Welcome back to Babylon Talmud. Today we're studying Daf Mem Gimel, Daf 43 of Masechta Nazir, friends. Daf 43 talks about Tumah. Basically, fun stuff. We're going to start in Daf Mem Beis and Beis, 3 lines from the bottom. Aval Tumah v'Tumah lo. Ho 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 ho. So at the top of the Amud, on the top of Mem Beis and Beis. So the very beginning of the Amud, it says Itmar Amar Rabba Amar Rafuna, whatever Mikamali Dibar Kosov Lo Yitamok Shu Omer Lo Yavel Azir La Tumah Azir La Bia Aval Tumah v'Tumah Lo. So yesterday, at the very top of the page is the Amud. So Rabba had said in the name of Rafuna that the pasuk says Lo Yitama and Lo Yavo, that you could violate two separate tumas if you become Tameh, like by touching, and then you go into a house and have tumas oil. But if you like touch one body and touch another body, so then it would not be multiple violations of tumah. So now, so says the Gemara now at the bottom, 3 lines from the bottom, Aval tumah v'tumah lo domitami v'koyim. So if you have tumas maga, let's say, followed by tumas ha'ohel, so then it would be two separate tumah violations. So like, if you're a Nazir, so you get lashes twice. But if you are touching two corpses, let's say, so then it would not be two separate violations. So then deha mitame v'koyim, right? Because he's already tamei once. So we're not going to make him tamei a second time. But tumah uvia nami amitame v'koi. But when you're tamei and you have tumas, let's say maga, and then tumas oil as well. So also he's already tamei. So why should he be chayiv for the second time? So Rabbi Yochanan kamabayis kambasada. So says Rabbi Yochanan, well, it depends if he's in the house or he's in the field. So when we say aval tumah v'tumah lo, so that's, for example, if he's in a field and he's holding two and he's touching two corpses, so he's only going to be chayiv makis once, not twice. Whereas because it's only considered one. We don't consider touching two corpses to be two separate tumas. But if he's in the house and if he walks into a house, then he becomes tamei at the same time that he also, right, meaning he becomes tamei by going into the house, right? It's considered like the house is filled with tumah, so it's like it's basically considered like tumas maga when he goes into the house, and at the same time he's now in the house, so it's also tumas ha'oel, so therefore he's chayiv twice. So b'fekti gemara b'bayis nami came into o'il yodei istoiv ki ayil kulei hay tamehu, but even with the house as well. Once his hand gets, right, if he sticks his hand into the house, so he becomes tamei with tumas maga, right? Because again, we consider like the house is filled with tumah. So once he sticks his hand into the house, it's tumas maga. And when the rest of his body follows into the house, so then at that point it's tumas ha'oel. But wasn't he already tamei at the time once he put his hand in? I had a teacher in high school that he used to say, darn it, if you don't shut up, I'm going to throw your rear end out of here and you're going to follow. He was a funny guy. I mean, at least I thought so, but I'm not such a good judge. Alright, so Bebayis Nami, he came to oil yodis. Once he sticks his hand in, so he stoives, then he becomes tamei, ki ayil kulei hay tameu. And then when the rest of his body follows, so then he's already tamei because he already stuck his hand in. Sorry, this is super technical. El Amar Belazar if yado mishum tuma ika mishum bialeko. So says Belazar, okay, you're talking right. If he first sticks his hand in and he becomes tamei, and then when the rest of his body goes in, so then he won't be tamei a second time because he's already tamei. V'tzerev gufo tuma uvia ba'de'adadi kasi. But if he puts his whole body into the house at the same time, so then the tumas maga and the tumas ha'oel comes all at once, and that's why I'll be chayiv twice. But still, even if he goes in all at once, his shnaz is gonna get into the house before the rest of his body, So Memele, once the shnaz goes in the house, he becomes tummy. When the rest of the body follows, he's already tummy. So rather Rava's spin on is, look, if he sticks his hand into the house first, yes, then he's already tummy, and he won't be chayiv for the bia, for going into the house. Fine. Hichnis gufo tumo via ba'adiyadadi kasin. But if he leans back his head a shtickle, so that the shnaz is going to go into the house with the rest of the body, so then the tuma and the tumas oil will come at the same time. But still, even so, I mean, your toes, when you're walking into the house, your toes are going to become tummy before the rest of your body. So nocham also, again, the tumas maga is going to come before the tumas oil. Elam Rav Papa. So rather says Rav Papa Kigon, for example, shnichnos b'shida teva umigdol. Well, for example, if he was brought into the house in some kind of like a chest, uvachaveru far olavas hamazeva, and then his friend came and removed the lid from the chest. So now all of a sudden the tumah hits him, and he's also in the house. So it's the tumah and the tumas oil tumas maga and tumas oil at the same time. So the tumah will be about the adarit, that the tumah and the bia happens at the same time. Caution. My brother Ashram kagon the ayil kshu goses v'nofak nishmosei ad yosef the tumah uvia ba'ad the adadi caution. The other option is that the Nazir goes into the house, and at the time that he goes into the house, the fellow in the house is not yet dead. And then, he's a goses, he's about to die, but he didn't yet die. And then he dies. So then, Mimele, the Nazir is inside the house, so the house fills up with tumah, and it's tumas maga, but it's also tumas oil. So it's so the maga and the bia come at the same time. But the tumah and the bia come at the same time. So those are two options for how he could be chayiv for the tumah and for the bia. One is that he came in a box and somebody opened up the box. The other one is that when he went into the house, the fellow wasn't dead yet, but then he died. Tanu Rabbanan the Rabbi start leichaloi ad sha sheyamus. Also, the pasuk says, this is, I believe, by a kohen. It says leichalo that he can't become profaned, and that is dafka when he dies. Okay, at the time that he dies. So a kohen can't become tummy to somebody to a mace. Rebbe Omer b'mosam yitamo. Rebbe says, I believe that this is by Nazir. It says that he cannot become tummy to them when they die. Achiyom was dafka until they die. Maybe now, what's the difference between leichalo and b'mosam yitamo? So Rabbi Yochanan mashmos darshan kibanau. Says Rabbi Yochanan, there's no difference, right? In both cases, you only become tummy when the fellow dies. Right, so meaning the issue with a Nazir or a Kohen becoming tummy to a mace would only be when the person actually dies. And says Rabbi Yochanan, there's no difference between if you learn it out from the Heichal or from Bimosam. It's just it's just technicality of which pasuk you learn it out, but there's no actual difference. Rish Lakish Omar goses, whereas Rish Lakish says no, there is a difference. The difference is a goses, a fellow who is about to die. The Mandamer milei afilu goses. So the Mandamer who says that you shouldn't become profaned, right? That a kohen cannot become profaned. So that includes he shouldn't even become be with a goses, with somebody who's about to die. Mandamer b'mosam achayamus in goses law. But if you learn it out from b'mosam, from when they die, so then they have to actually be dead. But a goses, somebody who's about to die, would not be an issue for a Nazir or for a Kohen. Now, according to the Tanakh, learns it out from Leichalo. But what about the pasuk of Rebbe that Rebbe brings of Bimosam? So Rebbe. Well, the Tanakh actually needs the pasuk of Bimosam, like a brisa in which Rebbe says, the Tanya Rebbe Omer says, Rebbe Bimosam eino mitame. That a Nazir cannot become tameh to a mace. However, he can become, if it would be acceptable for him to touch it would be okay if he touched a person with saras or a zav. He's not allowed to touch a mace, a corpse. Now, according to Rebbe, who learns out from b'mosam that it's only an issue once the person dies. So, but don't you need b'mosam to teach that it's davka somebody who dies, but not a mitzora or a zav? Imkain lemekra b'mos. My b'mosam shmaz mina tarte. So Rebbe would answer back, well, if that was the case, if it was only teaching about the mitzora or the zav, then it should say b'mos. But why does it say b'mosam shma mina tarte? So we learn out both that it excludes a mitzora or a zav. And also that it's only an issue when the person is actually dead. According to Rebbe, who learns it out from b'mosam that it's only once they die. What does he do with the pasuk of leichalo? So leichalo he needs it for the following: that it davka applies to somebody who is not yet profaned, is not yet, I guess, tameh. To the exception of somebody who is already tameh. So now, but according to the Tanakama, who learns that he has to be dead from leichalo, don't you also need it? Don't you need leichalo to teach? That it only applies if you're not yet tameh. So imkein lemekra leochel ma leichalo ma mina tarte. So he says, look, he could have then just said leochel leichalo. This added vav teaches both things. It teaches that it, he only becomes tummy when the fellow dies, and also that it's only if he's not yet tummy. Meisve, but we have a kasha against the Tanakama. The Tanakama based on our Rish Lakish explains. So it's Rish Lakish had explained that according to the Tanakama, who learns out from the Eichalo, he would say that even a gose, somebody who's dying, would be a problem. So but we have a kasha. The pasuk says Adam enu metame ela achetetze nafsho, that a person only transfers tuma once he dies. Va'afilu meguyed va'afilu goses. And even if he was mortally wounded, or if he was sick on his deathbed, it would not be considered dead. But the Tanakama, according to Rish Lakish, explains that a goses is that he cannot become tameh to a goses. So so the Gemara says, well, there's actually a difference between tuma and becoming impure and becoming profane. So in terms of becoming impure, a goses does not impart impurity. But in terms of profaning, so a goses, somebody who's on his deathbed, who's about to die, does profane. Alright. Amar Rav Chizda says, Rav Chizda, Amar Rav, in the name of Rav, Nikta Rosho Shal Oviv Enu Metame Lo. If a fellow, so if you have like a kohen or a Nazir, and his father's head, so his father dies. So So if you have a kohen, right? So a kohen is allowed to become tameh to immediate relatives. But says Rav Chizda in the name of Rab that if a fellow's father, if a kohen's father his head is severed from his body, well, in that case, then the kohen cannot become tameh to his father, right? Nikta Rosho Shalav, if a kohen's father, his head is plopped off, Eino Mitamilo, the kohen cannot become tameh to his father. My time outcome, because the pasuk says La'ovim, that the kohen can become tameh to his father, Bizmanshu Shalim, as long as the father is whole, is complete. Bizmanshu Chaser, not if he is lacking anything, and if his head is cut off, then he's missing his head. And the son cannot, the kohen cannot become tameh to him. Amalei Rav Amnuna Elimiata Kazu bepakta da'aravos. But says Rav Amnuna, but what happens if you have a father and a son who are kohanim and they are traveling in the barrens of Aravis? Ufasku ganove l'reishe, and nudniks came and they plopped off the father's head. Hachinami delo litamele. Would you say that the son would be unable to become tameh to take care of his father because he's missing his head? Omalei meis mitzvah ko omart. So Rav Chizda responds to Rav Amnuna and he says, leave me alone. You're asking me about a meis mitzvah. A meis mitzvah is somebody who doesn't have anybody to bury him. says of Chizde, sure, I said that if the father is missing the head, the son who's a kohen cannot become tamei. But in this case, where they're traveling in the barrens of Aravis, and then and nudniks come and plop off the father's head, of course the son can take care of his father because it's a meis mitzvah. It's somebody who needs to be buried, doesn't have anybody else to bury him. Hashto yeshloma b'achrinim michayv bavlo kol shekain. If a kohen, right, a kohen is allowed to become tamei either to his immediate relatives or to a meis mitzvah, or to somebody. If he comes in contact with a corpse that has nobody to bury it, so he can bury that corpse. So right now, if he's traveling with his father and the nudniks plopped off his father's head, so he should be able to bury his father because he's a meis mitzvah. Meis mitzvah v'atanya. But 1 second. Don't learn in the Brayse ezu meis mitzvah. Who would be considered a meis mitzvah? Kol she'ein lo kovrin. Somebody who doesn't have anybody to bury him. Kori v'achirim onin also. But if you can call for help, ein ze meis mitzvah. It's not a meis mitzvah. Va'isla bro. And in this case, the kohen had his son who he was traveling with. So sure, the nudniks removed his head, but his son is around and he can ask for help. So why should the son be able to become tamei to his father? So it shouldn't be considered a meis mitzvah. Came to cause of bo'orcha k'misha ein lo kovim dami. To which the Gemara answers, well, since they're traveling and they're in the middle of nowhere, so then it's considered, the father would be considered like a meis mitzvah, and the son would be able to, in that case, become tamei to his father. Okay, fine. Meisvei, we have a kasha. We have a kasha against Rab. Lo yitama. So it says by lo yitama. It says by a kohen that a kohen can become tamei to his sister. Lo hu mitame ve'enu mitame le'vorah. Now he can become tamei to her if she dies, but not to her limbs. If like only specific limbs. If her limbs were severed from her body, he cannot become tamei to those limbs. Lefi she'enu mitame le'ever menachai shel aviv. Because even a father's even his father who's alive, but if a limb was removed from his father, he would be unable to become tamei to a limb from his father. But he could be machzor on etzem kisor, meaning if you have a fellow who's a kohen and his father passes away and he's burying the father, and then they realized that they missed, somehow they missed a bone from his father the size of a barley kernel. So you can go back and get that. So, my machzer hu al etzem kisor, what does that mean? Lav l'meimer di mechzer porta. Doesn't that mean that the father Memela was missing part of his body? He was missing the etzem kisor, and nonetheless we said he's allowed to bury him, right? Meaning Rav had said at the top of the Amud, that if the father is missing, right, it has to be right shalim. What does it say? Not if the father is lacking any amount, right? To which you said if he like cuts off the head, right? If his head gets cut off, so then the son cannot become tamei to him. Yet over here we're saying that if he's burying his father and then they realize that they missed an etzem kisaora, a bone the size of a barley kernel, so then he can go back for it. But doesn't that mean that Memela, the father, was missing part of his body and the son was able to bury him anyways? Lo, Rabbi Yehuda, you don't worry about that. Bryce adds Davka. Rabbi Yehuda, the Tanya, as we learn in the Bryce, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer says, Rabbi Yehuda, lo, mitame, can become tamei to her, ve'enu mitame levarel, but he cannot become tamei, right? A kohen can become tamei to his sister, but not to her limbs. She'enu mitame al ever menachai shel aviv, because after all, he's not allowed to, he is unable to become tamei to the Aver menachai. If his father's still alive, but limb was removed, he would be unable to become tamei to that limb. Avamitame lever minameis shel aviv, but he can become tamei to a limb from if his father's dead, so he can become tamei to a limb from his father. So we see that he could interact with his father who's missing parts of his body. So Rabbi Yehuda would be the author of this Braise, who says that you can become tamei even if your father is missing part of his body. But Rav, who says that if he's missing if he's missing his head or other part of his body, so he cannot become tummy, so that would not be like Rabbi Yehuda. V'atani Rav Kahana Reb Eliezer ben Yaakov. Rav Kahana, but one second, Rav Kahana taught in a brisa that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says mitame ve'eno, or a brisa from Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, mitame ve'eno mitame le'evara, lo mitame ve'eno mitame le'evara, that a kohen could become tummy to his sister but not to her limbs. Prad lechazayis min ames, and that also excludes that he cannot become tummy to a kazayis from a corpse. V'kazayis netzel, or kazayis of netzel, I don't know what that is. Umilo tarvet rekev, or a spoonful, a ladleful of rot, I guess from a corpse. So he can't become tummy to any of those. Yacholo yitam l'shejev l'golgolis. Is it possible that he also would be unable to become tummy to his sister to just her spine or her skull, or binyana, or most of her bones in terms of like like most of her body of bones, or most of the number of bones? Fine. Kosuv ve'amarta aleim osef l'cha kosuv tuma acheres. So the pasuk says ve'amarta aleim, and sell them and speak to them, which adds more circumstances in which a kohen can become tummy to his sister, and that is if there is the skull or the spine or most of the bones of her body. Yachol lo yitam l'shejev l'gogolis v'lerov binyan l'rov binyan shel acherim. Now, is it possible that you can only become tamei to like the spine and most of the bones of your sister, but let's say your father or other immediate relatives, you'd be unable to become tamei for, if it's like just the spine? So Omar ma'achosum yuchedes shegufa talibo u'mitamin l'shejev l'gogolis binyan l'rov binyan. So we say no, just like by his sister, it's his responsibility to bury her, and he can also become tamei even if it's just her spine or her skull or most of her limbs. Or most of her bones. So Av Kol Shenafsho Talu. Fine. So Av Kol Shenafsho Talu Bo Mitame L'Shejev L'Gogolis L'Binyano L'Binyano. So also anybody, any close relative, any immediate relative, he would be able to become tummy to them, even if it's just like most of their bones. Now, so we see that he's able to become tamei even if it's choser, even if it's missing, right? If it's just the spine, for example. Sahinami Rabbi Yehuda, yeah, but that's also Rabbi Yehuda. V'Rav the Amar Ki'aitana, but Rav, who says that you would not be able to become tamei if your relative is missing any limbs. So then that is like Rav Titania, as we learn in the Brayse, Ma'aseh Shmis Avush Rabbi Yitzchak beginzok, that Rabbi Yitzchak's father died in Ginzak, and they let him know about it 3 years later, which of course by then, the body is decomposed somewhat, at least somewhat, and therefore it's lacking, it's missing. And Rabbi Yitzchak asked Rabbi Shua ben Levi and the four elders that were with him, and they said, they said, look, your father has to be whole and not lacking at all. So we see that that's like Rav, who says that the father, the relative would have to be, the father would have to be whole, can't be lacking at all. Friends, that was Daf Mem Gimel of Masechet Nazir. Hope you enjoyed. Peace out.